coup has been confirmed in Guinea-Bissau. Now, earlier today, we heard heavy gunfire outside the presidential palace, just days after general elections took place.
November 26, 2025, a single gunshot pierced the humid air of Bissau. Sharp, deliberate, final. And in that moment, Guinea-Bissau understood everything had changed. What followed wasn't chaos, it was precision. Soldiers moved through the streets with the calm confidence of men executing a plan rehearsed 100 times. Checkpoints materialized at intersections. Borders slammed shut. A curfew descended without warning, and somewhere in the presidential palace, President Umaro Sissoco Embalo vanished into military custody. But here's what makes this moment different from the typical African coup narrative you've heard before. This wasn't a spontaneous eruption of military frustration. This was a calculated intervention timed to the second, striking exactly 1 day before official election results were to be announced. And for those of us watching West Africa's democratic backslide with concern, this moment in Guinea-Bissau reveals something profoundly important about where our continent stands today. Let me break down what really happened, why it matters, and what this means for the future of democracy in West Africa. The thing about coups is they rarely announce themselves with trumpets. They whisper first. That evening, Bissau felt different. People who were there describe a heaviness in the air, that instinctive tension that makes you look over your shoulder without knowing why. Market vendors packed up earlier than usual. Conversations at street corners grew quieter. Something was building. Then came the first shot. Not a volley, not an exchange of fire. Just one clear, unmistakable sound that cut through the evening like a blade. For a moment, the entire capital seemed to hold its breath. Motorcyclists pulled over. Cars slowed to a crawl. People froze mid-stride, trying to decide whether to run or hide. The second burst of gunfire removed all doubt. This wasn't random violence. This was a signal. And then they appeared. Soldiers, emerging from alleyways and side streets, taking positions at key intersections with the kind of military precision that only comes from detailed planning. No shouting, no panic, just calm, methodical control. They checked vehicles, inspected phones, asked for identification, all with an eerie composure that made the moment even more terrifying. Within an hour, the entire capital was locked down. Checkpoints multiplied. Military vehicles blocked roads that had been open minutes before. Residents peered through curtains, watching their city transform into something unrecognizable. When the official announcement finally came, it was chilling in its brevity. The High Military Command for the Restoration of National Security and Public Order has assumed total control of Guinea-Bissau. Brigadier General Denis Nkanha, head of the presidency's military office, made the announcement at Armed Forces headquarters, declaring that President Embalo had been deposed, the electoral process suspended, and all borders closed. But the most disturbing part? President Embalo himself confirmed to journalists that he was arrested at around 1 p.m. while in his office at the presidential palace. Not in hiding, not fleeing. Sitting in his office when armed men came for him. This is the 9th coup or coup attempt Guinea-Bissau has experienced since independence in 1974. But this one feels different, more coordinated, more deliberate, and far more revealing about the fragility of democratic institutions across our continent. In any political crisis, there's one voice everyone expects to hear first, the president's, an emergency address, a reassurance to the nation, a show of authority and control. That night, there was nothing, just silence. And that silence became its own kind of statement. Because in West Africa, when a president goes silent during a military deployment, history has taught us what that usually means. President Umaro Sissoco Embalo, the former military officer who came to power in a controversial 2020 election, who styled himself as a strong man bringing order, discipline, and development, who compared himself to authoritarian leaders like Rodrigo Duterte, suddenly had no voice at all. The presidential palace, supposedly the most secure location in the country, became evidence of how completely the military had taken control. Guards who were meant to protect the president instead stood as sentinels for a new order. Reports trickled out slowly. Some said Embalo had been moved to a secure location. Others whispered he'd tried to flee. But eventually, the truth emerged. He was under arrest, detained by the very military structure he once commanded. And he wasn't alone. Opposition leader Domingos Simoes Pereira, head of the PA-JAC party, was also arrested, along with presidential candidate Fernando Dias da Costa, the man who, according to opposition claims, had actually won the election. Think about that for a moment. The sitting president arrested, the opposition leader arrested, the opposition candidate arrested, all communication channels controlled by the military. This wasn't just removing one leader. This was dismantling the entire political structure. But to understand why this happened with such surgical precision, we need to go back to the election itself, an election that was broken from the beginning. Elections are supposed to resolve conflicts, not create them. But Guinea-Bissau's November 2025 vote was poisoned before a single ballot was cast. The first red flag? The PAIGC, the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, the historic liberation movement that freed Guinea-Bissau from Portuguese colonialism, was barred from fielding candidates. The Supreme Court claimed they filed their applications too late. But many saw this as political engineering designed to eliminate Embalo's strongest opposition. For context, brothers and sisters, the PAIGC isn't just another political party. This is the organization founded by Amilcar Cabral, the revolutionary thinker whose ideas about African liberation influenced independence movements across the continent. This is the party that led Guinea-Bissau to independence in 1974. Excluding them from the election was like trying to hold an election in South Africa without the ANC. Technically possible, but fundamentally illegitimate. So the opposition rallied behind Fernando Dias da Costa as their unity candidate. And what happened? Both Embalo and Dias claimed victory before any official results were announced. Not "we're confident" or "early indicators suggest." They flat out declared themselves winners. When two men claim the same throne simultaneously, you don't get democracy, you get a countdown to crisis. Election observers knew something was wrong. Civil society organizations raised red flags. International monitors questioned the process's legitimacy. But the train had already left the station, and everyone could see the wreck coming. The election occurred in a context where ECOWAS had already withdrawn its observer mission after being threatened with expulsion months earlier, a clear sign that Embalo's government didn't want international scrutiny. And here's the crucial detail. Embalo had already been ruling by decree since 2023, when he dissolved the opposition-controlled parliament. He'd survived at least two previous coup attempts in 2022 and 2023. His entire presidency was marked by constitutional violations and authoritarian drift. In many ways, this coup wasn't an interruption of democratic rule. It was the climax of democracy's slow death in Guinea-Bissau. The timing tells you everything you need to know about this operation's sophistication. The military didn't wait for results to be announced. They struck the night before. Why? Because once official results exist, someone becomes the legitimate winner. Someone gains a democratic mandate. Someone has the moral and legal authority to govern, and that creates a problem for anyone trying to seize power. By intervening before results were released, the military froze the entire political process in limbo. No winner meant no legitimacy crisis. No transition meant no obligation to respect civilian authority. They created a blank space where anything was possible because nothing had been decided. Military officers have learned that the window of opportunity is narrow. Strike too early, and you face international condemnation for disrupting elections. Strike too late, and you're overthrowing a legitimate government. But strike in that precise moment between voting and results, you're just restoring order during electoral confusion. The border closures were equally calculated. Land and air borders were immediately sealed, cutting off diplomatic pressure, limiting information flow, and giving the military breathing room to consolidate control. A closed border is an information vacuum, and in that vacuum, the military controls the narrative. The curfew served a similar purpose, not safety, control. A population locked indoors can't protest, can't organize, can't form crowds of resistance. Silence is easier to maintain than order during mass demonstrations. And look at how the soldiers behaved. No wild shooting, no aggressive confrontations, just calm, professional control. Their composure sent a message. This isn't chaos we're managing. This is a plan we're executing. For many Guineans, particularly those who've watched their country stumble through decades of instability, this might have even felt like relief. Not celebration, but relief. Because at least someone was in charge. At least the uncertainty had a shape. That's the tragedy of failed democracy. It makes military rule look like order. Dawn came, but Bissau didn't feel like itself. The usual symphony of African city life, the motorbikes roaring past, vendors shouting prices, children laughing on their way to school, all of it was muted. The city was awake, but not alive. People moved carefully, glancing at soldiers posted at every intersection. Shops opened late, owners standing nervously in doorways as if waiting for permission to exist. Markets that normally burst with energy operated in whispers. Parents kept children home without being told. Schools remained closed though no official order had been issued. Fear doesn't need announcements. It fills spaces faster than laws. And everywhere, soldiers. Not threatening, just present. Their calmness was more unsettling than aggression would have been, because calm soldiers means this is normal for them. It means they're not reacting to chaos. They're maintaining their version of order. The curfew remained. The borders stayed closed. And with every hour of silence from any government authority, the military's control felt less temporary and more permanent. People began to realize this wasn't an interruption. It might be the new reality. International reactions came swiftly but predictably. ECOWAS Chair Julius Maada Bio unequivocally condemned the coup, calling it a grave violation of Guinea-Bissau's constitutional order. The United Nations, the African Union, and various international bodies issued statements of concern, but from inside Guinea-Bissau, those voices felt distant. When soldiers control your streets and your president is detained, international statements don't change your immediate reality. And here's what makes this particularly painful for those of us who care about Pan-African sovereignty and authentic African governance. This crisis exposes the emptiness of our regional institutions. ECOWAS condemned the coup, but had already been kicked out of Guinea-Bissau months ago for trying to observe the elections. They had no leverage, no presence, no ability to influence events. After coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, ECOWAS has become a paper tiger, issuing condemnations that military juntas ignore with impunity. The organization that was supposed to safeguard West African democracy has become largely irrelevant in the region's most critical moments. Now, my brothers and sisters, let's zoom out and see the forest, not just this one tree. Guinea-Bissau's coup is not an isolated incident. It's the latest symptom of a democratic pandemic sweeping across West Africa. What's happening? Why is military rule making a comeback across a region that seemed to be consolidating democratic gains? The answer is complex, but several factors stand out. First, failing democratic institutions. In too many cases, elections have become exercises in manipulation rather than genuine democratic choice. When opposition parties are banned, courts are corrupted, and electoral commissions serve incumbent presidents, people lose faith in the democratic process itself. Second, economic stagnation and corruption. Guinea-Bissau is one of the world's poorest countries despite being a major cashew producer. When civilian governments fail to deliver development while politicians grow wealthy, military intervention can look like a reset button. Third, the erosion of international leverage. France's declining influence, ECOWAS's weakness, and the AU's ineffectiveness mean there are fewer consequences for military takeovers. International condemnation has lost its teeth. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, popular frustration. In some of these countries, military takeovers initially enjoyed popular support. People were tired of corrupt, ineffective civilian governments and welcomed military promises of change. This last point is critical, and it's something we need to grapple with honestly. History shows us again and again that military governments rarely deliver on their promises. They may bring temporary stability, but they also bring repression, corruption, and eventually new crises that lead to new coups. Guinea-Bissau is the perfect example. This country has experienced 9 coups, or coup attempts since independence. Each time, the military promises to fix things. Each time, they fail. And each time, the cycle begins again. As of now, the situation remains fluid and deeply uncertain. The military has installed General Horta Inta A as head of a one-year transitional government. They claim this is temporary, just long enough to restore order and prepare for new elections. But we've heard these promises before, haven't we? Several scenarios are possible. Scenario 1, genuine transition. The military keeps its word, organizes credible elections within a year, and returns to barracks. This would be the best outcome, but history suggests it's the least likely. Scenario 2, extended military rule. The military uses the transitional period to consolidate power, then finds excuses to delay elections indefinitely. We've seen this playbook in other countries. Security concerns or political instability become justifications for extending military control. Scenario 3. Embalo's return. Here's where it gets really interesting. Some analysts suggest this might be a simulated coup designed to eventually reinstall Embalo with even more power. Given Embalo's authoritarian tendencies and past manipulation of crises, this isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Scenario 4. Renewed instability. The opposition refuses to accept military rule, protests erupt, violence follows, and Guinea-Bissau descends into the kind of chaos that has plagued it for decades. This creates conditions for yet another intervention, continuing the cycle. The Popular Front, a civil society coalition, has already accused Embalo and the army of staging a simulated coup to prevent the release of election results. The PAIGC has called for protests and demanded the results be released. The stage is set for confrontation. So what does all this mean for those of us who believe in African sovereignty, who support leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, who challenge neo-colonial structures, who want to see authentic African governance emerge? It means we need to think clearly about the difference between revolutionary change and opportunistic power grabs. Not all military interventions are the same. When Traoré took power in Burkina Faso, he articulated a clear vision of breaking free from French neocolonialism, mobilizing popular support, and prioritizing Burkinabe sovereignty. When Thomas Sankara took power in 1983, he transformed Burkina Faso with genuine revolutionary programs that benefited ordinary people. But Guinea-Bissau's coup doesn't fit that pattern. This looks more like military officers maneuvering for power in a broken political system, not revolutionaries fighting for national transformation. The challenge for Pan-Africanists is distinguishing between military interventions that genuinely challenge neo-colonial structures, rare, military interventions that simply replace one corrupt elite with another, common. We must support African sovereignty without romanticizing every military takeover. We must critique failed civilian governments without assuming military rule is the solution. We must demand better from both civilian and military leaders. The real lesson from Guinea-Bissau is this: democracy fails when institutions are hollow. Elections without integrity, courts without independence, parliaments without power. These aren't democracy, they're democratic theater. And when people realize they're watching a performance, rather than participating in genuine self-governance, they stop defending those institutions. They might even welcome military intervention as a way to sweep away the charade and start fresh. But here's the hard truth. You can't build genuine democracy through military force. You can only build it through patient, difficult work of strengthening institutions, educating citizens, fighting corruption, and holding leaders accountable. That work is slower and less dramatic than a coup. But it's the only path that leads somewhere other than the next crisis. Guinea-Bissau now stands at a crossroads it stood at many times before. Will it finally break the cycle of instability? Or will this be just another rotation of a wheel that keeps spinning without moving forward? The answer depends on whether the military genuinely transitions to civilian rule, whether future elections have integrity, whether political leaders put national interest above personal ambition, and whether ordinary Guineans have the space to build a democracy that actually serves them. But the bigger question haunts all of us watching from across Africa. Is democracy failing in West Africa, or was it never truly built in the first place? Because if what we've been calling democracy was really just neo-colonial structures with voting, then maybe these military takeovers aren't destroying democracy. They're exposing its absence. And if that's true, then the real work ahead isn't defending institutions that never worked. It's building new ones that do. That's the conversation we need to have. Not defending every military intervention, not romanticizing strongmen, not accepting hollow elections as genuine democracy, but honestly assessing what authentic African governance looks like and how we build it. Guinea-Bissau's crisis is a mirror. What we see in it reflects the condition of democracy across our continent. The question is, what are we going to do about it? What do you think, family? Is military intervention ever justified when democracy becomes theater? How do we distinguish genuine revolutionary change from opportunistic power grabs? And what does authentic African governance look like in the 21st century? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's have this conversation honestly and without fear. If this analysis helped you understand what's really happening in Guinea-Bissau and across West Africa, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to see it. And subscribe to this channel. We're committed to bringing you analysis of African affairs that you won't find in mainstream media. Analysis that respects your intelligence, that grapples with complexity, and that never forgets we're talking about real people's lives and futures. Because the story of Africa is being written right now. And we all have a role in whether that story is one of genuine liberation or repeated failure. Until next time, stay informed, stay critical, and stay committed to the Africa we know is possible. Power to the people, always.